The car's engine faded into the distance, leaving nothing but the whisper of wind through broken shutters and the settling dust on the unpaved road. Mariam stood in the doorway of what her son Khalid had called the cottage, though it was generous to use such a quaint term for this crumbling structure at the edge of Wadi al-Hitan, a village that time itself seemed eager to forget. "It's just for a few months, Mama," Khalid had said, not quite meeting her eyes as he'd unloaded her 2 suitcases and the box of kitchen essentials he'd picked up from the discount store in the city. "Just until I sort things out with Nadia. You understand, don't you? The apartment is too small for all of us, and with the baby coming—" She had understood perfectly. She understood that her daughter-in-law had never wanted her there, that the walls of their modern flat had grown thinner with each passing month, that her presence had become an inconvenience too burdensome to bear. She understood that her son, her only child, the boy she had raised alone after his father's death, had chosen his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. But she had said nothing. What could she say? That she was 68 years old and being deposited in a half-ruined house in a village she'd never heard of? That the roof clearly leaked, judging by the water stains on the ceiling? That there were more cracks in the walls than solid plaster? "The landlord says the house is sound," Khalid had continued, speaking too quickly, too eagerly. "And the rent is almost nothing. There's a well in the back, and the village has electricity. Most of the time, the bus comes through twice a week if you need anything from town." Twice a week. Mariam had lived in Lahore for 45 years, where buses came every 15 minutes and the city never slept. Now she would measure time by the twice-weekly arrival of a bus. "And Mama," Khalid had added, pausing at his car door, "you won't be alone. There's a neighbor in the house next door. The landlord mentioned him." Mariam had glanced at the neighboring structure, if it could even be called that. It was more ruin than house, its walls standing like broken teeth against the sky, its windows dark and empty as a skull's sockets. Someone lives there. That's what the landlord said. Khalid had shrugged, already sliding into his car, already leaving. "I'm sure they'll help if you need anything. Village people are like that, aren't they?" And then he was gone. And Mariam was alone with her 2 suitcases, her box of cheap pots and pans, and a neighbor who lived in a house that looked like it should have been condemned decades ago. The first 3 days passed in a blur of survival. Mariam swept out the dust and dead insects, scrubbed the floors until her knees ached, and discovered that the electricity worked exactly as promised, intermittently and without warning. The well in the back produced water that ran rust-colored for the first few minutes before clearing to something that might be safe to drink if boiled long enough. She saw no sign of the neighbor. The ruined house next door remained silent and still. No smoke rose from its chimney. No light appeared in its windows. No sound emerged from within its walls. Mariam began to wonder if the landlord had been mistaken, or if Khalid had simply lied to make her feel less abandoned. On the 4th morning, she decided to explore the village. Wadi al-Hitan consisted of perhaps 40 structures scattered along both sides of a road that had once been paved, but now showed more holes than asphalt. Many of the buildings were abandoned, their doors hanging open, their interiors exposed to the elements. The occupied homes could be identified by small signs of life: a goat tethered in a yard, laundry hanging on a line, a patched roof that didn't leak. The village had one shop, a dim room attached to the front of someone's house where goods were displayed on tilting shelves. Mariam bought tea, rice, lentils, and oil from an old man who regarded her with open curiosity but asked no questions. As she counted out her carefully rationed money, a woman's voice came from the doorway behind her. "You're the one who moved into the widow's house." Mariam turned to find a woman of perhaps 50, heavy-set and solid, wearing a faded blue dress and a headscarf printed with roses. Her face was weathered by sun and hardship, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. "The widow's house?" Mariam asked. "That's what we call it. Old Sakina lived there until she died. 3 years ago now. Her sons fought over it for a while. Then none of them wanted it, so they rent it out when they can find someone desperate enough." The woman's bluntness might have been offensive in the city, but here it seemed to be simple honesty. "I'm Fatima. I live in the house with the green door, 4 down from you." "Mariam," she offered a cautious smile, My son rented the house for me. Temporarily. Fatima's expression suggested she'd heard that before. You met him yet? Who? Your neighbor, the one in the ruin next door. So there was a neighbor. No, I haven't seen anyone there. Something flickered across Fatima's face, an expression Mariam couldn't quite read. It might have been concern or perhaps satisfaction. Well, you will eventually. Everyone does. What do you mean? Who is he? But Fatima was already moving toward the shelves, running her fingers along the sparse selection of goods. Best get settled before the heat comes. Summer here isn't like the city. The sun gets mean. Mariam wanted to press for more information, but the old shopkeeper was looking at her with impatient eyes, clearly wanting to close up for his afternoon rest. She gathered her purchases and left, Fatima's words echoing in her mind. Everyone does. That night, Mariam heard sounds from the neighboring house for the first time. She had been lying on her rope bed, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, listening to the unfamiliar noises of the village night. Dogs barking in the distance, the wind rattling loose boards, the call of some bird she couldn't identify. The moon was full, its light streaming through her uncurtained window and painting silver rectangles on the floor. Then came a different sound. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on stone. Mariam sat up, her heart suddenly racing. The footsteps were coming from next door, from the ruined house she had been certain was empty. They moved with an odd rhythm, step, drag, as if the walker had an injured leg. She rose and moved to her window, pressing herself against the wall so she could peer out without being seen. The ruins were bathed in moonlight, every broken beam and crumbling wall rendered in stark relief. And there, moving through the roofless structure, was a figure. It was too dark to make out details, but she could see it was a man, tall, thin, moving with that distinctive dragging gait through the skeleton of what had once been rooms. He seemed to be inspecting the ruins, running his hands along walls, pausing to look up at the stars through the missing roof. Mariam watched, barely breathing, as the figure completed his circuit of the ruins. When he reached the farthest corner, what might have once been a bedroom, he simply sat down on a pile of stones and became still, his face turned toward the moon. She waited for him to move again, to return inside wherever he actually lived, but he remained motionless. After 20 minutes, she gave up and returned to her bed, though sleep was a long time coming. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of houses with no roofs, and men who sat among ruins waiting for something she couldn't name. In the morning, she looked out her window and saw no sign of the nighttime visitor. The ruins were empty and still in the harsh sunlight. Mariam began to wonder if she had dreamed the whole thing, a product of exhaustion and the strangeness of her new situation. But that evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and red, she saw smoke. It rose from somewhere within the ruins, a thin gray line ascending into the darkening sky. Someone was cooking. Someone lived there, in those broken walls with no roof, exposed to the elements. Mariam had been raised with certain proprieties. You did not leave a neighbor in such conditions without at least offering assistance. Perhaps the man was homeless, or mad, or simply too poor to afford better. Whatever the case, the least she could do was acknowledge his existence. She prepared a plate of rice and lentils. Simple food, but it was warm and nourishing. She covered it with a cloth, and before she could talk herself out of it, walked the 20 yards to the neighboring ruins. Up close, the state of the structure was even worse than she'd thought. The walls stood to varying heights, none higher than 8 feet. The roof had collapsed long ago, its beams lying in rotted fragments among the weeds that had taken over the floor. What had once been doorways were now just gaps in the masonry. "Hello?" she called out, standing at what she guessed had been the front entrance. "Is anyone here?" No answer. But the smoke still rose from somewhere within, and now she could smell it. Not just wood smoke, but something else. Herbs, perhaps, or incense. Mariam stepped through the entrance gap, picking her way carefully over broken stones and debris. The interior was a maze of partial walls and collapsed rooms, made eerie by the growing darkness. "I've brought food," she called out. "I'm your neighbor. I just wanted to introduce myself." "Leave it at the entrance." The voice came from somewhere deeper in the ruins, rough and dry, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. Mariam couldn't see the speaker. I thought perhaps we could meet properly," she ventured. "I'm new here and Leave the food, go home, lock your door." There was no hostility in the voice, but there was something else. Something that made Mariam's skin prickle with instinctive unease. It was the tone of someone giving a warning. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Do you need help?" A sound came from the darkness. It might have been a laugh, though it held no humor. "I need you to leave, woman, now, before it gets full dark." Mariam set the plate down on a relatively flat stone just inside the entrance. Her hands, she noticed, were shaking slightly. "I'm in the house next door if you need anything." "I know where you are. Go." She went, walking quickly back to her house. And yes, she locked the door, though she couldn't have said why. As she bolted it shut, she heard the footsteps again. Step, drag, and through her window saw the tall figure emerge from the ruins to collect the plate she'd left. He moved into a patch of moonlight, and for just a moment she saw his face. It was gaunt, almost skeletal, with deep-set eyes and a black beard streaked with gray. But it was his expression that caught her, a look of such profound weariness, such bone-deep exhaustion, that it seemed impossible a living person could carry it and continue breathing. Then he stepped back into shadow, and the ruins swallowed him again. "You shouldn't have done that." Fatima stood in Mariam's doorway the next morning, her arms crossed, her face stern. Somehow word had already spread. In a village this small, someone must have seen Mariam carrying the plate to the ruins. "I was just being neighborly," Mariam protested. "He's living in a ruin with no roof. I thought—" "You thought wrong." Fatima pushed past her into the house, uninvited, and sat heavily on Mariam's single chair. "You want tea?" "No. Of course you do make us tea, and I'll tell you about your neighbor." Mariam's irritation at the woman's presumption warred with her curiosity. Curiosity won. She put water on to boil and measured out tea leaves while Fatima settled herself like she was preparing to tell a long story. "His name is Ibrahim," Fatima began. "Or at least, that's what he says it is. He came to the village about 12 years ago, walking in from the desert like he'd crossed from hell itself. Collapsed right there in the road in front of Yusuf's shop. You bought from Yusuf yesterday, the old man. We thought Ibrahim was dying. He looked half dead already, all bones and burned skin and eyes like he'd seen things no man should see." Mariam poured the tea and brought Fatima a cup. "What happened to him?" "That's the question nobody can answer. He wouldn't say then, won't say now. Old Dr. Hamid, he's dead now, God rest him, examined him and found scars. Lots of scars. The kind you get from torture," the doctor said, though he whispered it and made us promise not to speak of it. "Torture?" Mariam's hands went cold around her teacup. "The doctor thought maybe Ibrahim had been in one of the prisons. Political prisoner, maybe, or someone who crossed the wrong people. You know how it was. How it still is. In some places, people disappear into the night, and if they come back at all, they come back broken." Fatima sipped her tea, her eyes distant. "We nursed him back to health, or as healthy as he was going to get. He never spoke much, but he helped around the village when he could fix things, did odd jobs. Then one night, maybe 3 months after he arrived, he moved into the ruins. Just gathered up his blanket and few possessions, and made that place his home." "But why? Surely someone could have—" "We tried. God knows we tried. Offered him rooms, offered to help fix up an abandoned house, offered him money to rent something better. He refused everything, said he needed to be there, in those ruins. Said it was—" Fatima paused, her face troubled. "He said it was penance." "Penance for what?" "He wouldn't say. But here's the thing you need to understand, Mariam. Ibrahim is not right in the head. Oh, he's not violent or dangerous, at least he never has been. But he has his ways, his rituals. Every night he walks the perimeter of those ruins. Every night he sits in that far corner facing east until dawn. Sometimes we hear him talking to people who aren't there. Sometimes we hear him weeping. Mariam thought of the gaunt face in the moonlight, the profound weariness in those eyes. The poor man. Poor man, yes, but also proud man. He doesn't want pity, and he doesn't want help. He wants to be left alone with whatever demons haunt him. Fatima set down her cup with a decisive clink. So you leave him be, understand. Don't bring him food, don't try to befriend him, don't go poking around those ruins. He gave you good advice last night. Stay in your house, keep your door locked. Why? What happens if I don't? Fatima's expression grew darker. Nothing, probably. But sometimes, on the bad nights, Ibrahim has his episodes. He screams things in the dark, names, pleas, curses. Sometimes he thinks he's back wherever he was before, back in whatever hell created him. On those nights, it's better not to be anywhere near him. He's never hurt anyone, but he scares the children. And once he almost hurt himself trying to... She stopped abruptly. Trying to what? Nothing. Just stay away from him, that's all. Let the broken man be broken in peace. After Fatima left, Mariam stood at her window and looked at the ruins. They were empty in the daylight, silent and still. But she could imagine Ibrahim there, walking his nightly circuit, sitting until dawn in his corner, doing penance for sins she couldn't name. She should have felt frightened. She should have taken Fatima's warning to heart and resolved to avoid her neighbor entirely. But what she felt instead was a deep, aching sadness. And something else recognition, perhaps. She was here, abandoned by her son in this forgotten place, because she had become inconvenient. Ibrahim was here by choice, but he was just as abandoned in his way, exiled to these ruins by whatever had broken him. They were both ghosts, she realized, both haunting the edges of a dying village, neither fully alive nor fully dead. She tried to follow Fatima's advice. For 3 days, she avoided looking at the ruins, kept to her house, focused on making her temporary prison as livable as possible. But on the 4th night, the screaming began. It started just after midnight, jerking Mariam from uneasy sleep. A man's voice, raw and ragged, crying out words she couldn't quite make out. The screaming went on and on, sometimes forming into sentences, sometimes dissolving into wordless howls of anguish. Mariam lay rigid in her bed, her heart pounding. This must be one of the bad nights Fatima had mentioned. She should stay inside, stay safe, let it pass. But the screaming didn't pass. It went on for 10 minutes, 20, half an hour. And gradually she began to make out words. Please, not them, not the children. Take me instead, please. The words were in Urdu, but broken, desperate, interspersed with sobbing. And beneath them, another voice, Ibrahim's voice, but different, younger somehow, saying over and over, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Mariam found herself at her door before she consciously decided to move. She unlocked it and stepped out into the night. The moon was dark now, the world lit only by stars, but she could see the ruins as a blacker mass against the black sky. Ibrahim? She called out. Ibrahim? It's Mariam. Your neighbor. The screaming cut off abruptly. For a moment there was only silence and the wind. Then, go away. His voice was hoarse, wrecked. She could hear him gasping for breath between words. Are you all right? A sound that might have been laughter. No, I will never be all right. Go away, woman. This isn't for your eyes. What isn't? She found herself walking toward the ruins again, driven by something she couldn't name, compassion perhaps, or simply the need to not be alone in her own darkness. Let me help you. You can't help me. No one can help me. I am beyond help, beyond forgiveness, beyond... His voice cracked and dissolved into a sound of such raw pain that Mariam felt it in her bones. She reached the entrance to the ruins and stopped, peering into the darkness. Where are you? Don't come in, please. I'm not myself tonight. That's all right. I'm not entirely myself either these days. She took a step inside, her eyes adjusting slowly to the deeper darkness. We can be our not selves together. You don't understand. His voice came from the direction of the far corner, where she'd seen him sit on that first night. You should be afraid of me. Should I? Have you hurt anyone? Yes. The word was barely a whisper. Long ago, so many. That's why I'm here. That's why I'll always be here. Mariam picked her way carefully through the debris, moving toward his voice. What happened to you? I can't... He broke off with a sound like a sob. I can't speak of it. Not aloud, not ever. Then don't. She had reached the far corner now. She could see him huddled against the wall, his tall frame folded in on itself, his face buried in his hands. Just don't be alone with it. Not tonight. She sat down on the pile of stones a few feet from him, tucking her shawl around herself against the night chill. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was broken only by his ragged breathing, gradually slowing, steadying. Finally, without looking up, he said, Why are you here? In this village, I mean. This isn't a place people come to. It's a place they end up. My son put me here. His wife is pregnant, and I was in the way. So he abandoned you. I prefer to think of it as a temporary arrangement. Now Ibrahim did look up, and even in the darkness she could see the bitter twist of his mouth. There's no such thing as temporary abandonment. Either someone stays or they leave. Your son left. The words hurt because they were true. And your family? Dead, or might as well be. I don't know. I haven't spoken to anyone from my old life in 20 years. Why not? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because the man they knew is dead. I killed him. What's left is just this. A ghost doing penance in a ruin. That's what you said before. Penance. What did you do that requires such punishment? I survived when I shouldn't have. I made choices that saved my life but cost others theirs. His voice broke again. I can still hear them, the ones I failed. They scream in my dreams, and sometimes, on nights like this, they scream when I'm awake. Their voices, their faces, their... God forgive me, I can't make them stop. Mariam thought of her own small grief, the son who no longer wanted her, the daughter-in-law who saw her as a burden, the grandchild she might never know. It seemed trivial compared to whatever torment consumed the man before her. But grief was grief, and pain was pain. You can't, she said quietly. Can't what? Can't make them stop. The voices, the memories, the pain. You can't make any of it stop by punishing yourself. Believe me, I know. I've spent the last year trying to make myself smaller, quieter, less troublesome, thinking if I just took up less space, my son would want me around. It didn't work. The pain doesn't stop because you suffer enough. It just is. Ibrahim lifted his head fully now, and in the starlight she could see his eyes, dark, haunted, but focused on her with sudden intensity. Then what do you do with it? I don't know yet. I've only been here a week. Ask me again in a month. She tried for a smile, though she wasn't sure he could see it. But I suspect the answer is that you carry it. You don't carry it alone, but you carry it. I've been carrying it alone for 12 years. Yes, I noticed. How's that working out for you? He made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Terribly. Then perhaps try something different. They sat together in the ruins until the first light of dawn began to gray the eastern sky. Ibrahim said little more, but his breathing remained steady, and the terrible tension in his frame gradually eased. When the sun finally broke the horizon, he stirred. You should go, he said, his voice rough but calmer. The village will be waking soon. They already talk about me enough. They don't need to talk about you, too. Mariam stood, her joints protesting the night spent on cold stone. Will you be all right? I'm never all right, but I'll survive until the next bad night. I always do. Ibrahim dash dash. Thank you for sitting with me. It helped. But please don't come back. I meant what I said. This isn't for your eyes, and I can't promise I won't be dangerous on another night. Have you ever actually hurt anyone? Since you've been here, I mean? He hesitated. No, but I've come close. When the memories are worst, I don't always know where I am, who I am. I could hurt someone without meaning to. I'll take my chances. Don't. The word was sharp, almost angry. Don't take chances on me. I'm not worth it. The person I was is dead, and what's left isn't enough to risk yourself for. Mariam looked at him, at the gaunt face, the haunted eyes, the frame bent by invisible weight. The person you were might be dead, but the person you are is clearly someone capable of remorse, of suffering for his failures, of trying to atone. That's someone worth taking a chance on. She left before he could respond, making her way back to her house as the village began to stir around her. Behind her, she heard his voice, barely loud enough to carry, "I was a soldier." She stopped but didn't turn around. "I was an intelligence officer," he continued, the words coming slow and painful. "During the Troubles, the bad years, I did things, terrible things, because I was ordered to, because I thought I was protecting something, because I was a coward who chose survival over morality. And when it all came apart, when the truth of what we'd done began to surface, I left my post, my family, everything. Came here to disappear. That's who your neighbor is. That's the man whose company you're so eager to keep." Now Mariam did turn. Ibrahim stood at the entrance to the ruins, silhouetted against the rising sun, his hands clenched at his sides. "Thank you for telling me," she said simply. "I'll bring dinner tonight. Try to be ready for it at a reasonable hour this time." She went inside before he could protest, but through her window she saw him standing there for a long time, staring at her house as if trying to solve an impossible equation. Fatima, predictably, was furious. "Are you mad?" she hissed, having cornered Mariam at Yusuf's shop that afternoon. "You were in those ruins with him, during one of his episodes? Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" "He never touched me, never even raised his voice to me." "This time? But what about next time? What about the time he doesn't recognize you, thinks you're one of his demons or tormentors or whatever ghosts haunt him?" Mariam selected a bag of flour, examining it with great interest to avoid meeting Fatima's eyes. "I'll take that risk." "Why? Why would you do this? You don't know him. You don't owe him anything." "I know what it's like to be abandoned," Mariam said quietly. "I know what it's like to be somewhere you never chose, forgotten by everyone who should care. Maybe I can't fix his pain, but I can at least acknowledge that it exists, that he exists." Fatima's anger seemed to deflate. "You have a good heart. But good hearts get broken here. This village, it's where people come to be forgotten. You can't save him from that." "I'm not trying to save him. I'm just trying to be a neighbor." That evening, Mariam prepared a simple meal, chicken curry with rice and fresh rotis she'd learned to make on an ancient tava she'd found buried in a cupboard. She covered the plates, and, at a reasonable hour this time, carried them to the ruins. Ibrahim was waiting at the entrance. In the evening light, she could see him more clearly. He was perhaps in his 50s, though suffering had aged him. He wore clothes that had been repeatedly mended, clean but worn. His hair was long and unkempt. His beard shot through with gray, but his eyes were alert and present. "You really came," he said, and there was wonder in his voice. "I said I would. Here." She handed him a plate. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I made something simple." He took the plate with hands that trembled slightly. Thank you. But you should know, I meant what I said this morning. About who I am, what I did. You should want nothing to do with me." "Do you want me to have nothing to do with you?" The question seemed to surprise him. "I don't know what I want. I've spent so long trying to want nothing. to be nothing, that I've forgotten how to want anything else. Then let me want things for both of us. I want to not eat alone tonight. Is that acceptable? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're a strange woman. You're a strange neighbor. We make a pair. They ate together on flat stones near the entrance, where the last of the daylight could reach them. Ibrahim ate slowly, methodically, like someone who had grown used to rationing or had forgotten how to take pleasure in food. Mariam told him about her life, about her late husband, about Khalid growing up, about her years in Lahore, about the slow dissolution of her welcome in her son's home. Ibrahim listened, but said little. When he did speak, it was to ask careful questions, never about himself, always turning the conversation back to her. It was clear he had once been educated, perhaps even refined. There were glimpses of the man he must have been, a turn of phrase, a reference to poetry, a dry observation that held genuine wit. When the food was gone and night had fully fallen, Mariam stood to leave. Same time tomorrow? Ibrahim shook his head. You don't have to do this. I know, I want to. There's a difference. Why? Because I'm going to be here for a while and it's easier to be miserable with company than alone. She smiled. And because you listened to my story tonight without judgment, without pity, without telling me everything would be fine. You just listened. That's a rare gift. I've had a lot of practice listening to ghosts. I suppose living people aren't so different. We're all just ghosts of who we used to be, aren't we? Might as well haunt this village together. This time his smile was real, brief, but genuine. You really are strange. So you've mentioned. Good night, Ibrahim. Good night, Mariam, and thank you. They fell into a rhythm. Each evening, Mariam would prepare dinner and carry it to the ruins. Sometimes they ate together. Sometimes Ibrahim was too deep in whatever darkness held him and could only manage a few words before disappearing into his corner. She learned to read his moods, to know when he needed conversation and when he needed silence. On better nights, they talked. Ibrahim spoke little of his past, but he spoke of books he'd read, places he'd traveled before his life collapsed. He had been to Europe once, he said, on some official business he wouldn't detail. He'd seen the Mediterranean, walked streets that were old when Pakistan was young. I thought the history there would make me feel small, he said one evening. All those centuries of civilization, of empire rising and falling, but instead it made me feel connected. Like suffering and joy are just part of the human condition, repeated over and over, and we're all just playing our small parts in an endless cycle. Is that comforting or depressing? Mariam asked. Both. Neither. It depends on the day. He stared into the small fire he'd lit against the evening chill. Mostly it helps me understand that I'm not unique. Thousands of men have done terrible things for causes they thought were just. Thousands have carried guilt they can't put down. I'm not special in my suffering. But you're not just your suffering. You're also the man who fixed old Yusuf's door last month when it fell off its hinges. The man who helped Fatima's son dig a new well. The man who does penance through small acts, hoping somehow it will balance the scales. It won't. There is no balance for what I did. What did you do? Exactly. Ibrahim's face closed like a door slamming shut. I can't. I've never spoken it aloud. If I do, if I make it real with words, I think it will destroy me completely. Then don't, not until you're ready. I'll never be ready. Then never. It doesn't matter. I don't need to know your sins to know you're trying to make amends for them. He looked at her then with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're too forgiving. I'm not forgiving anything. I just don't think people should spend their whole lives in ruins, literal or otherwise. Some people should. Maybe, but not tonight. Gradually, other changes came. Ibrahim began to appear during daylight hours, helping Mariam fix her leaking roof, showing her which plants near the village were edible and which were poison, teaching her how to coax the recalcitrant well pump into steady production. The other villagers watched these developments with mixed reactions. Some disapproving, some curious, some cautiously hopeful. "He's more alive than he's been in years," Fatima admitted one day, her earlier warnings seemingly forgotten. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." "I'm not doing anything. I'm just being here." Maybe that's enough. But not everyone was pleased. Old Yusuf pulled Mariam aside one afternoon, his face grave. "You should know, there are those in the village who say you're tarnishing your reputation, spending time with Ibrahim, a widow woman, and a single man, regardless of the circumstances. Let them talk. I'm old enough not to care about village gossip." "Perhaps. But your son, when he returns, he might care." "My son left me here and hasn't called once in 2 months. I don't think he cares about much beyond his own convenience." Yusuf's expression softened. "Then you and Ibrahim are well matched in your abandonment. Still, be careful. The world is not kind to women who step outside propriety." Mariam thought about this conversation that evening as she prepared dinner. She was 68 years old. She had raised a son alone, survived her husband's death, endured her daughter-in-law's coldness, and been deposited in a forgotten village like unwanted furniture. What did she have left to lose? Her reputation? Her dignity? Those had been taken from her the moment Khalid's car disappeared down that dusty road. When she brought dinner to Ibrahim that night, she found him agitated, pacing the perimeter of his ruins in the fading light. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing. Everything. The anniversary is coming." "Anniversary of what?" He stopped pacing and faced her, his expression tortured. "The day it happened. The day I became this." He gestured to himself, to the ruins, to everything. "Every year, when it comes around, I think maybe this will be the year I can't survive it. That the weight will finally crush me completely." "When?" 3 days from now. You should stay away that night, and probably the night after. I won't be safe to be around." Mariam set down the food. "Tell me what happened." "I can't." "You can. You need to. Keeping it locked inside is killing you." "I deserve to die from it." "Maybe, but I deserve to understand who I've been sharing meals with these past weeks. If you trust me with anything, trust me with this." Ibrahim sank down onto his usual pile of stones, his tall frame folding in on itself. For a long moment he was silent, and Mariam thought he would refuse again. Then, in a voice so low she had to strain to hear it, he began to speak. "I was an intelligence officer, as I told you, stationed in Kashmir during the worst of it. My job was to extract information from suspected militants. You understand what that means? Extract. Such a clean word for such dirty work." Mariam sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap, and said nothing. "I told myself I was protecting my country, that these were dangerous men, terrorists, people who would kill innocents if we didn't stop them. And maybe some of them were, but many weren't. They were just caught in the wrong place, said the wrong thing, knew the wrong person. And His voice cracked. "We did terrible things to them, things I can't speak aloud even now." "You tortured them." The word hung in the air between them. Ibrahim flinched as if she'd struck him. "Yes, that's the clean word for it too. Torture. But that doesn't capture the screaming, the begging, the way a man sounds when he's been broken completely. The way they looked at me with such hatred and fear that I could feel it like a physical weight." "Did you kill anyone?" "Not directly, but 3 men died as a result of what I did to them. 3 that I know of. There may have been more after I left, from injuries or infections, or simply from the will to live being beaten out of them." Mariam felt her stomach turn, but she kept her voice steady. "And the anniversary?" Ibrahim's face contorted with pain. "There was a man, young, maybe 25. We'd picked him up on suspicion. Someone had informed on him, said he was passing messages for the militants. He swore he was innocent, that he was just a shopkeeper, that he had a wife and 2 children, a boy and a girl. He begged us to contact his family to let them know where he was." He stopped, his breathing ragged. "We kept him for 3 weeks. My superior wanted a confession, wanted names of other operatives. I did my job. I did it thoroughly. By the end of the second week, he would have confessed to anything, named anyone, just to make it stop. He gave us 12 names. Half of them were probably innocent people he'd heard of, just trying to give us what we wanted. And then he died. Heart failure, the medical report said. He was young and healthy, but he died. Because of what I did to him. Because I was thorough in following my orders. Ibrahim's voice had dropped to a whisper. It was November 15th, 20 years ago. What happened to his family? I don't know. I never looked. I couldn't bear to know. After he died, something in me broke. I kept working for another month, going through the motions, but I was hollow inside. Then one night, I walked out of the facility and kept walking. I abandoned my post, my career, everything. Ended up here eventually, looking for a place to disappear. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. It's not enough. It will never be enough. That man's children grew up without a father because of me. His wife became a widow because of me, and he was just one. There were others, so many others, and I don't even know all their names. Mariam was quiet for a long time, watching the last light drain from the sky. She felt the weight of what he'd told her, the enormity of it. This wasn't a small sin, a minor mistake. This was profound moral failure, the kind that destroyed lives, his victims' lives, and his own. You're right, she said finally. It's not enough. No amount of suffering on your part will undo what you did. Those men are still dead. Those families still destroyed. You sitting in these ruins for the rest of your life won't bring any of them back. Ibrahim looked up at her, and she saw in his eyes a terrible hope. Hope that she would offer absolution, forgiveness, some way to lift the weight he carried. But, she continued, that doesn't mean you should stop living. That you should spend the rest of your existence in penance. Because that's just more waste, more destruction. You can't undo the past, Ibrahim. None of us can. But you can choose what you do with the present. I don't deserve a present. I don't deserve anything but this. He gestured to the ruins around them. Maybe not. But deserving isn't the point. You're alive. Those children you mentioned. They're not children anymore. They're adults now, living lives you'll never touch. The question isn't whether you deserve forgiveness. The question is what you're going to do with the years you have left. More penance. What else is there? Living. Actually living, not just existing. Using the time you have left to do some good in the world, even if it's small good, even if it never balances the scales, because the alternative is just more waste, more death, and those men you killed get their victory. They don't just lose their lives, they steal yours too. Ibrahim shook his head. You don't understand. The guilt. It's not something I can just set aside and move on from. It's woven into every breath I take. I'm not asking you to set it aside. Carry it, but carry it forward, not in circles. Stop walking the perimeter of these ruins every night like you're trapped in a cage. Start walking toward something. Toward what? I don't know. That's for you to figure out. But Ibrahim, she leaned forward, catching his eyes. That man who died 20 years ago, he's still dead whether you suffer or not. His children are still fatherless, whether you live in ruins or in a house. Your suffering doesn't honor them. It just creates more suffering in the world. Then what would honor them? I don't know. Maybe nothing can. But living a life that creates something good, that helps people, that acknowledges your failures while refusing to let them be the only thing you are, that might be a start. They sat in silence as the stars emerged overhead, visible through the missing roof. Finally, Ibrahim spoke again, his voice rough but steadier. The anniversary, I have to spend that night here. I have to remember. All of them, but especially him. The man whose name I learned only after he died, from papers in his pocket, Rashid. His name was Rashid Ahmed. Then I'll be here too. No, I told you. I'll be here, Mariam repeated firmly. Not in the ruins with you if you don't want that, but in my house next door, awake, listening. So you're not alone with it. You don't have to be alone anymore, Ibrahim. Even with this, his eyes glittered with moisture in the starlight. Why are you doing this? After what I've told you, why do you still want anything to do with me? Because I know what it's like to be discarded, and because somewhere in this man who tortures himself every night in these ruins, I see someone who still cares enough to feel guilt. That's not nothing. Evil men don't punish themselves for 20 years. Broken men do. And broken things can sometimes be mended. Not this broken. Maybe not. But I'm here anyway. The 3 days until the anniversary passed slowly. Ibrahim retreated into himself, speaking little, eating less. Mariam prepared meals and left them at the entrance to the ruins, and sometimes they were eaten and sometimes not. She could see him moving through his circuit at night, but his movements were jerky, agitated, like a man being pulled by invisible strings. Fatima came by on the second day. You know what's coming, don't you? The anniversary? He told me. He told you? Fatima's eyes widened. He never tells anyone anything. In 12 years, he's never spoken about his past, not even to old Dr. Hamid when the doctor tried to help him. He told me. What did he tell you? Mariam shook her head. That's his story, not mine to share. But Fatima, on the anniversary night, if you hear things from the ruins, if you hear him screaming, don't come. Don't let anyone else come. I'll be here. He won't be alone. Mariam, I know you mean well, but you need to understand. On these anniversary nights, he's worse than usual. Much worse. Last year, we heard him screaming from midnight until dawn. Some of the younger villagers wanted to call the police, thought he was killing someone. It was awful. Then he needs someone there even more. I won't let him suffer alone. Fatima studied her for a long moment. You care about him? As more than just a neighbor. I care about him as a fellow human being who's in pain. It's more than that, I think. And Mariam, I hope you know what you're doing. That man is damaged beyond repair. You can't save him. I'm not trying to save him. I'm just trying to sit with him in his darkness. Why? What do you get from this? Mariam considered the question carefully. A reminder that I'm not the only broken thing in this village. That my small suffering isn't the only suffering that matters, that maybe we can bear our burdens together instead of alone. And if he does something terrible, if the memories drive him to hurt himself or worse, then I'll deal with it. But I don't think he will. For all his pain, Ibrahim isn't self-destructive. He's just stuck. Caught in a moment 20 years ago, unable to move forward or back. Then I hope you can help him get unstuck. But be careful. Sometimes people are stuck because moving forward is more terrifying than staying in place. The anniversary night arrived with unseasonable cold. Mariam wore her heaviest shawl and made a large pot of tea, knowing it would be a long night. She positioned herself by her window, where she could see the ruins silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Ibrahim was already there, sitting in his corner facing east, motionless as a statue. The hours crept past. Mariam dozed in her chair, startling awake periodically to check on him. He hadn't moved. Then, just after midnight, it began. The sound that came from the ruins was barely human, a wail of such pure anguish that it seemed to tear the night itself. Mariam was on her feet and moving before she consciously decided to. Tea forgotten, caution forgotten, everything forgotten except the sound of a human soul in torment. She found Ibrahim on his knees in the corner, where he always sat, his hands pressed against the ground, his body shaking with sobs. The words came in broken streams between the crying. Rashid, I'm sorry, please. Your children, forgive me. I didn't know, please. Ibrahim. Mariam knelt beside him, her old knees protesting, but she ignored the pain. Ibrahim, I'm here. He didn't seem to hear her. His eyes were open but unseeing, fixed on something only he could perceive. The boy, he was 7. He came to the facility, looking for his father. We turned him away, told him we'd never heard of Rashid Ahmed. The look on his face. Ibrahim, look at me. Mariam reached out and touched his shoulder, and he flinched violently. Don't! I'm back there! I can see them all! His voice rose to a scream. All of them. Every face, every name, every... God help me, I remember all of them. Yes, you remember, and you should remember. But Ibrahim, you're not there anymore. You're here, in Wadi al-Hitan. It's November 2025. 20 years later, you're here, and I'm here, and Rashid is gone. But his children survived, and they're adults now, and they're living their lives. How do you know? How do you know they survived? His wife, she might have, without him to provide. You don't know that they didn't survive, and torturing yourself with imagined horrors on top of real ones doesn't help anyone. Ibrahim finally focused on her, his eyes wild and red-rimmed. Who are you to tell me what helps? You don't know. You can't understand. You're right, I can't understand, but I'm here anyway. Why? The word was almost a scream. Why do you keep coming here? Why won't you let me suffer alone like I deserve? Because no one deserves to suffer alone, not even you. Yes, I do. I killed people, Mariam. I tortured them. I broke them. I took fathers from their children and husbands from their wives, and I didn't even have the excuse of believing in what I was doing. I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway because I was afraid to refuse orders, afraid to lose my position, afraid to be seen as weak. The confession poured out of him like poison from a wound. I was a coward who chose his career over his conscience, and 3 men died because of it, and God knows how many others were destroyed, and I don't even know all their names, and I deserve every moment of this pain, every night of these memories, every... Stop. Mariam's voice cut through his spiral. Just stop for a moment and breathe. I can't breathe. Every breath is stolen from them. Then steal it and use it well. Ibrahim, listen to me. You're right about what you did. It was terrible, unforgivable, wrong. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. But you've spent 20 years punishing yourself, and those men are still dead. Your suffering doesn't bring them back. It doesn't ease their family's pain. It just creates more pain in the world. Then what should I do? His voice broke. Tell me what I should do, because I've been asking that question for 20 years and I still don't have an answer. Mariam sat back on her heels, thinking. Around them, the ruins stood silent, bearing witness. Finally, she said, Find them. What? Find their families. Rashid's wife and children, if they're still alive. The families of the others. Find them if you can. Ibrahim recoiled. No, I can't. They'd want me dead. I deserve... Maybe they would want that. Maybe they'd curse you. Maybe they wouldn't want anything to do with you, but at least they'd know. They'd know what happened to their father, their husband. They'd know someone remembers him. Someone carries his name and his face and feels the weight of what was done to him. That's not... I can't... And then, Mariam continued, if they need help, if they're struggling, you help them. Quietly, anonymously if necessary. You spend the rest of your life trying to repair even a fraction of the damage you caused, not as penance, not as punishment, but as restitution, as acknowledgement. Ibrahim stared at her. That's impossible. I'd have to leave here. I'd have to go back to Kashmir. I'd risk being arrested, charged. Yes, you'd risk something. You'd have to be brave. For once, after 20 years of running, you'd have to be brave. I'm not brave. I proved that 20 years ago. Then now's your chance to prove something different. They sat in silence. Ibrahim's shaking had subsided, though tears still ran down his face. Finally, he said, Even if I wanted to, even if I could find them, what would I say? Hello, I'm the man who tortured your father to death. Would you like some money? I don't know what you'd say, but it would be better than saying nothing, better than hiding here in these ruins, making no amends, helping no one, just wallowing in your guilt until you die. This from a woman whose son abandoned her in this forgotten village? What amends are you making? The words were cruel, meant to wound, but Mariam didn't flinch. None yet. I'm still stuck in my own ruins just like you, but maybe we can help each other get unstuck. Maybe that's why we're both here. Ibrahim laughed bitterly. Two broken people in a dying village trying to fix each other? That's absurd. Yes, completely absurd, but it's better than the alternative. Which is? Staying broken forever. The night wore on. Ibrahim's memories came in waves, sometimes overwhelming him with renewed grief, sometimes receding enough that he could speak almost normally. Mariam stayed with him through all of it, saying little, just present. She held his hand when the memories grew too heavy, and released it when he needed to pace. She listened to names of men he'd tortured, places he'd been, things he'd done that would haunt her own sleep in the nights to come. By dawn, he was exhausted, but calm. The anniversary had passed. He had survived it again, but this time, not alone. I need to think, he said as the sun rose. About what you said, about finding them. I don't know what I need, but thank you for staying. I'll always stay, Mariam said simply. That's what neighbors do. In the days that followed, a change came over Ibrahim. He was quieter, more thoughtful, but less haunted. He spent hours sitting in the ruins, but now he seemed to be thinking rather than just suffering. He began to speak of practical matters, how one might locate a family in Kashmir after 20 years, what resources might be available, what risks he would face. Fatima noticed. Something's different about him, she said to Mariam. He looks, less like a ghost. He's thinking about the future instead of the past. That's good, isn't it? I hope so. But not everyone in the village was pleased with the changes. Old Yusuf pulled Mariam aside one morning, his face grave. Your son came by yesterday. While you were at the ruins with Ibrahim, he left a message. He's coming to visit next week. Mariam's heart sank. He is? He didn't look happy. I think someone must have told him about your friendship with Ibrahim. Of course. In a village this small, word would have reached Khalid eventually. She wondered which of the villagers had felt compelled to inform her son that his mother was keeping unseemly company with the village madman. Let him come, she said with more confidence than she felt. I'm not doing anything wrong. By whose standards? Yusuf asked gently. I'm not judging you, Mariam. But your son, he might see things differently. When she told Ibrahim about Khalid's impending visit, his reaction surprised her. You should go with him, he said immediately. If he's come to take you back to Lahore, you should go. I don't want to go back. There's nothing for me there. There's your family, your grandchild, when it arrives. A family that doesn't want me. Khalid made that clear when he dumped me here. Ibrahim was quiet for a moment. I don't want you to sacrifice your relationship with your son because of me. I'm not worth that. This isn't about you. It's about me. About what I want for the first time in years. Mariam surprised herself with the vehemence in her voice. I spent 45 years being the good wife, the good mother, the helpful mother-in-law. I made myself small and quiet and useful. And where did it get me? Abandoned in a village I'd never heard of. So no, I'm not going back. Not unless I want to. And I don't. Then what do you want? I want to stay here. I want to keep having dinner with you. I want to help you find Rashid's family if that's what you decide to do. I want to live on my own terms for whatever time I have left. Ibrahim studied her face. You've changed since you came here. So have you. Not for the better, necessarily. I've just traded one kind of torment for another. Instead of punishing myself in silence, now I'm planning to march into Kashmir and face the families of the men I killed. That's not exactly moving toward happiness. No, but it's moving. That's something. Khalid arrived on a Thursday morning, driving the same car that had brought Mariam to the village 3 months earlier. He looked tired and irritated, and he didn't embrace his mother when he saw her. Mama, we need to talk. They sat in Mariam's small house while Khalid looked around with barely concealed disdain at her humble accommodations. I've been hearing things, he began without preamble, about you and some man who lives in a ruin, about you spending time alone with him, about... He stopped, his face flushing with anger or embarrassment. What are you thinking? Don't you care about your reputation? Not particularly, no. Well, I care about mine. Do you know how it looks? My mother, a widow, consorting with some vagrant. His name is Ibrahim, and he's not a vagrant. He's a man who's been through terrible things and is trying to make peace with them. I don't care what his name is. Mama, this is inappropriate. You're too old to be acting like this. Acting like what? Like a human being with her own thoughts and choices? It's not acting like you don't have a family that you need to consider. I left you here temporarily. You abandoned me here, Khalid. Let's be honest about what happened. Her son had the grace to look uncomfortable. It wasn't supposed to be forever, just until things settled down with Nadia and the baby. But now, with these rumors, I can't bring you back. My wife would never accept you after this. Then I won't come back. What? I said I won't come back. I'm staying here. This is my home now. Khalid stared at her. You can't be serious. This place is a ruin. You're living in poverty, associating with questionable people. I'm living in peace for the first time in years, and Ibrahim is not questionable. He's a good man who's suffered greatly. A good man? Mama, I asked around. He's mentally unstable. He screams in the night. He lives in ruins. He remembers the people he's hurt and tries to atone for it, which is more than most people do. So now you're defending him? A man you've known for 3 months? Over your own son? Mariam looked at Khalid, really looked at him. He had his father's eyes and his father's stubborn jaw, but somewhere along the way he had developed a hardness that neither she nor her late husband had possessed. When had he become so calculating, so concerned with appearances over substance? I'm not choosing him over you, she said quietly. I'm choosing myself. For once in my life, I'm choosing what I want. And what you want is to rot in this village with a madman. What I want is to live with dignity, to be valued for something other than my usefulness, to spend time with someone who listens when I speak and doesn't make me feel like a burden. The words hit home. Khalid flinched. You did, both of you. Nadia made it clear I was in the way, and you chose her comfort over my home. I don't blame you for that. A man should stand with his wife. But don't pretend you didn't abandon me here, and don't expect me to be grateful for the privilege of returning to where I'm not wanted. So that's it? You're staying here out of spite? I'm staying because I want to, because I've found something here worth staying for. Him? That broken man in the ruins? Friendship, purpose, my own life, call it what you want. Khalid stood abruptly. Fine, stay then. But don't expect me to support you. If you choose this life, you do it on your own. I expected nothing less. He left, without saying goodbye, his car kicking up dust as it roared back down the road toward the city. Mariam watched from her doorway until he disappeared, and found she felt no regret, no sadness, only relief. Ibrahim emerged from the ruins as Khalid's car vanished. I heard, he said. I'm sorry. Don't be, it's not your fault. Still, you gave up your family for myself. Don't take credit for my choices, Ibrahim. I would have refused to go back regardless of whether you existed or not. He smiled slightly. You're a formidable woman. I'm a tired woman who's finally done pretending. There's a difference. That night, they sat together in the ruins under a sky full of stars, and Ibrahim told her his decision. I'm going to do it. Try to find Rashid's family, and the families of the others if I can. Good. I'll have to leave. Go to Kashmir, maybe Lahore, follow whatever leads I can find. It could take months, years. Then take months, take years. I'll be here when you return. You're sure? You could still go back to your son, Make peace with him. There's no peace to be made. He made his choice and I made mine. Then you'll be alone here. The village isn't kind to women on their own. The village will adjust, and I won't be alone. I'll have Fatima and old Yusuf and the other villagers once they get used to me. And I'll have the knowledge that you're out there somewhere, trying to make amends. That's more than I had 3 months ago. Ibrahim was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm afraid. Of what? Of finding them, of seeing Rashid's children, who are adults now, of having to tell them what I did, of everything. Fear means you're doing something that matters. If you weren't afraid, it would mean you weren't taking it seriously enough. Will you? He stopped, then started again. Would you write to me while I'm gone? I don't know if I can do this alone. Of course. Where will you go first? Srinagar. That's where Rashid was from, according to his papers. I'll start there, ask around, follow whatever traces I can find. After 20 years, it won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. He left 3 days later, early in the morning, before the village was fully awake. Mariam stood in the road and watched him go, carrying a small pack and a burden 20 years in the making. He looked back once, raised a hand in farewell, and then he was gone. The ruins seemed emptier without him. Mariam found herself looking toward them constantly, half expecting to see his tall figure moving among the broken walls. But they remained silent and still. Fatima came by that afternoon, so he left. Yes, and you stayed. Yes. Are you sure about this, Mariam? You've given up a lot for a man who may never return. I didn't give up anything for him. I gave things up for myself. There's a difference. If you say so, but Fatima was smiling. You're either very brave or very foolish. Can't I be both? With you, probably yes. The first letter came 6 weeks later, hand-delivered by the twice-weekly bus driver. It was short, written in cramped handwriting on cheap paper. Mariam, I found them. Rashid's family. His wife remarried, moved to Islamabad. His children are grown. The boy is an engineer, the girl a teacher. They're doing well, better than I dared hope. I haven't approached them yet. I'm still trying to find the courage. How do you tell someone you killed their father? What words exist for that? I think of you often. The village, the ruins, our conversations. They keep me grounded when I want to run again. Ibrahim. Mariam wrote back the same day. Ibrahim. There are no right words. But silence is worse than stumbling speech. Tell them the truth. All of it. They deserve to know. The ruins are very empty without you. I've been teaching Fatima's grandchildren to read. It keeps me busy. I think I'll start a small school. The village has none, and the children deserve better. Be brave. You can do this. Mariam. The letters continued, back and forth over the months. Ibrahim's journey was slow and painful. He found 2 more families, both struggling, both shocked, when a stranger appeared and told them the truth about their lost fathers and husbands. One family cursed him and threw him out. The other listened in silence, then accepted his offer of help. He sent money when he could, money earned from odd jobs in Srinagar, in Lahore, anywhere he stopped long enough to work. He was methodical and thorough, just as he had been in his former life, but now in service of healing rather than harm. Mariam's letters told of her own transformation. The school she'd started had 8 students now. The village had accepted her presence, grudgingly at first. Then with growing respect, she'd fixed her house properly with money earned from teaching. She'd made friends beyond Fatima. I understand now why you lived in the ruins all those years, she wrote in one letter. Not the punishment part, but the choosing. You chose your suffering because it felt real, more real than the alternative of trying to pretend everything was fine. I spent years pretending I was fine while dying inside. This life, hard as it is real. I choose it freely. The seasons turned. Winter came and went, then spring, then summer. A year passed, then the start of another. Mariam's grandchild was born. Khalid sent a stiff formal letter informing her, with no invitation to visit. She felt a pang at that, but it was distant, manageable. She had her own life now. Then, on a morning in late autumn, 2 years almost to the day after he'd left, Ibrahim returned. Mariam was teaching her students when she heard the commotion, children's voices raised in excitement, Fatima calling out. She stepped out of the small room she'd turned into a schoolhouse and saw him standing in the road. He looked different, older certainly. The 2 years had weathered him further, but also lighter somehow. The terrible weight he'd carried seemed diminished, though not gone. It would never be entirely gone. "You came back," Mariam said. "I said I would." They stood looking at each other across the dusty road, and Mariam felt something shift in her chest. Not love, exactly, or not only love. Recognition, companionship, the bone-deep understanding of two people who had walked through their separate hells and emerged changed, but not destroyed. "Did you find them all?" "3 families. I'm still looking for the others. But yes, I found Rashid's wife and children. I told them everything. His daughter slapped me. His son cried. His wife..." His voice caught. His wife said she'd prayed for 20 years to know what happened to him. She said at least now she knew he hadn't just abandoned them, that he'd loved them until the end. "And did you help them?" "The son needed money for his daughter's surgery. His wife was sick. I gave them everything I had, got a loan for the rest. The daughter's school needed books, I bought them." He smiled slightly. "I've been working construction for 2 years. I'm very good at carrying heavy things now." "And the ruins?" He glanced toward the broken house next door. "I thought maybe I'd done enough penance, that maybe I could live somewhere with a roof. There's a house for rent down the road, 3 doors down from Fatima. It has a roof, a working stove, even glass in the windows." "That sounds almost civilized." "We could both use some civilization." Ibrahim walked closer, and Mariam could see the lines in his face, the gray in his beard, the scars both visible and invisible. But she could also see something else, a man who had confronted his demons and, if not defeated them, had at least learned to carry them forward rather than in circles. "I missed you," he said simply. "I missed you too, though the ruins were much quieter without your nightly pacing." He laughed, and it sounded rusty but genuine. "I'll try to keep the drama to a minimum in my new accommodation. Don't make promises you can't keep." The children had gathered around them now, curious about the tall stranger. Mariam introduced him. "This is Mr. Ibrahim, my neighbor," and watched as his face softened at their eager questions. He had brought them sweets from the city, she discovered, pulling wrapped candies from his pack. "You bought gifts for children you'd never met?" she asked. "You wrote about your school, about your students. I wanted to..." He stopped, suddenly uncertain. Was that presumptuous? No, it was kind. That evening they sat together outside Mariam's house, no longer in the ruins, but on a proper bench Ibrahim had carried over from the rental house down the road. The sunset painted the sky in oranges and purples, and the village sounds surrounded them, dogs barking, children playing, someone's radio playing old songs. "Tell me everything," Mariam said, "all of it, the parts you left out of the letters." So Ibrahim told her. About the moment he'd knocked on Rashid's widow's door, his hands shaking so badly he could barely stand. About how she'd looked at him with suspicion turning to horror as he explained who he was. About sitting at her small kitchen table while she served him tea with trembling hands, both of them crying as he told her everything he remembered about her husband's last weeks. She said, his voice broke, she said that knowing was better than not knowing, that the not knowing had been worse than any truth could be. She'd imagined he'd abandoned them, that he'd had another family, that he'd stopped loving them, and he hadn't. He died calling their names. "You told her that?" It was true. Those were his last words, his children's names. Ibrahim wiped at his eyes. "For 20 years, I've been haunted by what I did. But telling her, telling them, somehow made it more real and less real at the same time. Does that make sense?" "No, but I believe you anyway." The son was harder. He's 32 now with a daughter of his own. He looked at me with such hatred at first. said I should be in prison, said I should be dead. And he was right. But then his daughter came into the room. She's 5, with her grandfather's eyes, and he looked at her and then back at me, and I saw something change in his face. He asked me if I had children. I said no. He said that was good, because if I'd had children, he would have had to hate them too, and he was tired of hating. Mariam reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she'd touched him with deliberate affection, and she felt him startle slightly, but he didn't pull away. We spent 3 days together, Ibrahim continued. He showed me pictures of Rashid, his father from before. Rashid on his wedding day, holding his newborn son, teaching the boy to ride a bicycle. He'd been a real person, not just a broken man in a cell. Seeing those pictures, it was the hardest and most important thing I've ever done. And the money you gave them? His daughter needed surgery, something with her heart. They couldn't afford the procedure in Pakistan, but there's a hospital in India that could do it for less. I gave them everything I had saved, then worked for 6 months to get the rest. She had the surgery 2 months ago. She's recovering well. You saved her life. I took her grandfather's life. This doesn't balance it. No, but it's something, and something is infinitely more than nothing. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged. Finally, Ibrahim said, I need to keep looking. There are still 2 families I haven't found. And even after I find them, I need to keep working, keep helping. It's not penance anymore, or not just penance. It's living, Mariam finished. Actually living, not just existing. That's what I told you 2 years ago. You were right, as usual. He squeezed her hand. But I was hoping. I'd like to base myself here, in the village. I can travel when I need to, follow leads, but I'd like to have a place to come back to a home. I think that can be arranged. And I'd like... He hesitated, then plunged ahead. I'd like to help with your school. I was educated once, before everything. I could teach mathematics, maybe some history if you'd have me. Mariam felt warmth spread through her chest. I'd have you. The children need more than one teacher, and I'm hopeless with mathematics. It's settled then. I'll rent the house, help with the school, continue my search when I can. And maybe... He looked at her with an expression that was equal parts hope and fear. Maybe we can build something here, both of us. Not to replace what we lost, but to create something new. I'd like that. Even knowing who I am, what I've done? Especially knowing that, because you're not hiding from it anymore. You're facing it and trying to make amends. That takes more courage than anything else I can imagine. Ibrahim was quiet for a moment. I bought the ruins, he said finally. What? Before I came back, I tracked down Sakina's sons and bought the ruins from them. They were happy to sell. No one else would want them. I thought maybe I'd tear them down, plant something in their place. A garden maybe, something that grows instead of decays. That's a good idea. Will you help me with the garden? Of course, though I should warn you, I've never gardened before. I might kill everything we plant. Then we'll learn together. That seems to be our pattern. The months that followed brought changes to Wadi al-Hatin. Ibrahim moved into the rental house and became a fixture in the village. No longer the mysterious madman in the ruins, but simply Ibrahim the teacher, Ibrahim who helped repair old Yusuf's shop when it flooded, Ibrahim who told stories to the children and remembered all their names. He and Mariam cleared the ruins together, stone by stone, beam by beam. It was hard work, made harder by their age, but they persisted. Fatima helped, and eventually some of the other villagers joined in. By spring, the ruins were gone, replaced by cleared earth ready for planting. What should we grow? Mariam asked, surveying their work. Roses, Ibrahim said immediately. Rashid's wife told me her husband loved roses. He'd had a small garden in Srinagar, all roses. She said the smell reminded him of his mother. So they planted roses. Dozens of them. Every variety they could find or afford. Some died, as Mariam had predicted, but many thrived, and by the following summer, the place where the ruins had stood was a riot of color and fragrance. The village children loved the garden. They played among the roses, carefully taught by Ibrahim not to break the stems. He told them stories there, not of his past, never that, but of other things, poetry he'd memorized, histories he'd read, mathematics disguised as games. Mariam watched him with the children and saw a different man than the one who'd screamed in the ruins on that first terrible night. The ghost still haunted him. She knew that some nights she heard him pacing in his house, heard the murmur of his prayers or his nightmares. But the ghosts no longer controlled him. He controlled them, or at least negotiated with them. And slowly, carefully, something grew between them that was more than friendship. Neither spoke of it directly. They were too old, too bruised by life for dramatic declarations. But it was there in the way Ibrahim brought her tea in the mornings, in the way Mariam mended his clothes without being asked, in the comfortable silences they shared. "People are talking," Fatima said one day, her tone more amused than concerned. "About you two." "Let them talk. They're saying you'll marry, that it's inevitable." "Is it? Isn't it? You spend every day together. You've built a garden together. You teach together. What else would you call it?" Mariam considered this. Companionship, friendship, mutual survival. Those are just different words for the same thing. Fatima smiled. "He's good for you. You're good for him. In a village like this, that's as close to love as most people get." That evening, Mariam raised the subject with Ibrahim as they sat in the rose garden, the air sweet with fragrance. "Fatima thinks we should marry?" Ibrahim looked up from the mathematics problems he'd been grading. "Does she?" "She's not wrong that people are talking." "Does it bother you, the talk?" "No. Does it bother you?" "No." He set down his papers. "But Mariam, if we did marry, it wouldn't be for the reasons people usually marry. I can't. I'm too broken for romance, for passion, all that young people's foolishness. I'm 70 years old. I've had my share of foolishness. What I want now is partnership. Is that something you could offer?" "It's the only thing I can offer. That and my considerable collection of traumas." "I'll take both." "Then yes. If you'll have me, with all my damage and history and late-night demons, I'll marry you." "When? Tomorrow? Next week? I'm not particular about timing." "Let's say next month. Give the village time to prepare for the gossip." They married on a warm day in early autumn, 3 years after Mariam had first arrived in Wadi al-Hitan. It was a simple ceremony. The local imam, Fatima as witness, a handful of villagers no family attended from either side. Khalid had not responded to Mariam's letter informing him of her plans. Ibrahim's family, if they still existed, knew nothing of his whereabouts. But it didn't matter. They had each other, and they had the village, and they had their school, and their garden, and their small, hard-won peace. "We're a strange pair," Ibrahim said that evening as they sat in the rose garden that had once been ruins. "Two broken people, too old for new beginnings, playing at happiness." "We're not playing," Mariam corrected. "We're building. There's a difference." "Fair enough. Then we're two broken people building happiness from ruins. That's only slightly less absurd." "Absurdity suits us." Ibrahim continued his search for the remaining families. It took another year, but he found them both, one in Karachi, one in a small village near the Afghan border. Both encounters were painful. Both resulted in some form of reconciliation, or at least acknowledgement. He gave them what help he could, and they accepted it with varying degrees of grace. "I'll never be free of it," he told Mariam after the last visit. "The guilt, the memories, the weight of what I did. Even helping their families, even trying to make amends, it doesn't erase anything." "No, but you're not trying to erase it anymore. You're trying to live with it. That's different." "Is it enough?" "I don't know, but it's what we have." The school grew. By the 5th year, they had 20 students, ranging in age from 5 to 15. Some came from Wadi al-Hatin, others from nearby villages. Mariam taught reading and writing. Ibrahim taught mathematics and science, and together they taught their students that mistakes didn't define you. but what you did afterward might. They never explicitly told the children Ibrahim's history, but the older students sensed something. They knew he woke screaming sometimes. They knew he disappeared for days or weeks to help family friends in other cities. They knew he and Miss Mariam, as they called her, had both come to the village as broken things and somehow put each other back together. Mr. Ibrahim, one of the older boys asked one day during a mathematics lesson, "Why do you live here? You could teach in the city, make more money." Ibrahim looked at the boy for a long moment. "Because I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and this is where I'm trying to learn how to live with them." "Did you hurt someone?" "Yes. Many people." "Why?" "Because I was afraid. Because I followed orders I should have questioned. Because I was weak when I needed to be strong." The boy considered this. "And now you're strong?" "No, now I'm just trying to be better than I was. It's not the same thing, but it's something." The lesson had moved far from mathematics, but no one seemed to mind. The children looked at Ibrahim with new understanding, not pity, but recognition that adults, too, struggled with right and wrong. "Can you ever make up for bad things?" another student asked. "No," Ibrahim said simply, "but you can try, and trying matters." On the anniversary of Rashid's death, the date that had once driven Ibrahim to screaming madness, they held a small memorial in the rose garden Mariam had suggested it the previous year, and Ibrahim had agreed after much hesitation. They invited the whole village. Old Yusuf came, and Fatima with her extended family, and the school children, and dozens of others. Ibrahim stood before them, his voice steady but low, and told them the story, all of it. Who he had been, what he had done, why he had come to their village. The silence after he finished was profound. Some villagers looked shocked, others angry, others thoughtful. But no one left. They stood together in the garden among the roses, bearing witness. "I'm telling you this," Ibrahim continued, "because I'm tired of hiding. Because this village has been my home for 15 years, and you deserve to know who I am. If you want me to leave, I'll understand. If you want nothing more to do with me, I'll accept that. But I couldn't continue living here under false pretenses." Old Yusuf was the first to speak. "You fixed my door. You helped my grandson with his schoolwork. You've been a good neighbor for 15 years. He paused. "What you did before you came here, that's between you and God. But what you've done since, that's between you and us. And from where I stand, you've earned your place here." Others murmured agreement, not everyone. Some villagers left the gathering, their faces hard with judgment. But most stayed. Most chose to see the man before them, rather than just his history. Afterward, Mariam found Ibrahim in the house they now shared, sitting by the window and staring out at nothing. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I don't know. I thought telling them would feel like freedom, but it just feels like I've opened a wound that was starting to heal. Maybe wounds need to be opened sometimes, to clean them out properly before they can really heal. I'm not sure I believe in real healing anymore." "Then believe in this. You told the truth. You stopped hiding. That's something." "It's something," he agreed, though I'm not sure what. But in the days that followed, something did shift. The villagers who had stayed at the memorial began to treat Ibrahim differently. Not with pity or judgment, but with a kind of respect. They'd seen him vulnerable, seen him admit his failures, seen him refuse to make excuses. That mattered more than his clean record ever could have. The years accumulated. Mariam and Ibrahim grew older together, their bodies slowing but their minds sharp. The school became a permanent institution, eventually taken over by younger teachers while they served as advisors. The rose garden flourished, becoming a landmark in the region. People came from other villages to see the place where ruins had been transformed into beauty. Khalid never reconciled with his mother. He sent a stiff letter every year on Eid, and Mariam responded in kind, but they never saw each other again. She learned through indirect channels that he had 2 children now, a boy and a girl, and that he'd told them their grandmother was dead. It hurt, but distantly, like an old injury that ached in cold weather. Ibrahim's nightmares never fully stopped, but they grew less frequent. The worst anniversaries were still difficult, but they managed them together. He continued to send money to the families he'd harmed, and eventually developed relationships with some of them. Not friendship, exactly, but a kind of understanding. "Do you think Rashid would forgive me?" he asked Mariam one evening in their 10th year of marriage. They were sitting in the garden, as had become their habit, watching the sunset paint the sky. "I don't know. Does it matter?" "Shouldn't it? I think what matters is that you've forgiven yourself enough to keep living, to keep trying to do good. If Rashid's watching from wherever he is, maybe that's what he'd want. Not endless suffering, but an honest attempt at redemption." "You always make it sound so simple." "It's not simple, it's just less complicated than the alternative." Ibrahim laughed, and the sound was easier than it had once been. "I love you, you know. I don't think I've said that explicitly." "You say it every day, in how you bring me tea in the morning, in how you make sure the students understand their lessons, in how you tend the roses even when your arthritis is bad." "Still, I should say it. I love you." "I love you too, even though you're impossibly dramatic about everything." "Dramatically traumatized. There's a difference." "If you say so." They sat together as the stars emerged. Two old people in a forgotten village, holding hands in a garden built on the ruins of separate sorrows. It wasn't the life either of them had planned or expected, but it was real, and it was theirs, and it was enough. Mariam died first, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83. Ibrahim woke one morning to find her gone, her face calm and untroubled. He sat with her for a long time before calling anyone, holding her hand and talking to her as if she could still hear. "You saved me," he told her, still form. "I know you'd argue about that, say you didn't save anyone. But you did. You taught me that carrying guilt forward was possible, that living with damage was different from being destroyed by it. I don't know how I'll do this without you," but he did do it. He lived another 5 years, teaching when he could, tending the roses, writing letters to the families he'd harmed, and helped his nightmares return with greater frequency. But they were bearable. He'd learned to bear them. When his time came, the village buried him next to Mariam in the small cemetery at the edge of town. The rose garden was maintained by the school's students, who'd heard the story of the teacher who'd lived in ruins, and the teacher who'd helped him build a garden. And in Kashmir, in Islamabad, in Karachi, and in a village near the Afghan border, families received final letters from Ibrahim's executor. The letters contained money, all he had left, and a simple message. "This won't make up for what was taken from you. Nothing can, but I tried, for what it's worth. I tried." Years later, a young couple drove through Wadi al-Hatin, tourists who'd heard about the remarkable rose garden built on the site of old ruins. They stopped to admire the flowers, read the plaque that told a simplified version of the story. Local teacher and his wife built something beautiful together, left it to the village. "It's romantic," the woman said, "building a garden together." "I wonder what was here before," the man mused, looking at the neat rows of roses. An old woman overheard them, Fatima's granddaughter, now village elder herself. "Ruins," she said, "and before that, pain. But sometimes pain can be transformed into something beautiful if you're willing to do the work." "That's a nice thought," the woman said. "It's more than a thought, it's what they proved." The elder smiled. "The ruins are gone now, only the garden remains." The couple took their pictures and drove on, but the garden stayed, roots deep in soil that had once supported ruins, blooms fragrant in air that had once been filled with screams. The past was not erased. It never could be. But it had been acknowledged, faced, and finally transformed into something that could sustain life instead of destroying it. And in the village, the children still learned their lessons, still heard stories of the teachers who'd been broken and had somehow found a way to help each other heal. The stories didn't pretend healing was complete or easy. They didn't pretend the past didn't matter. They simply insisted that the past didn't have to be the only thing that mattered. That sometimes, when you've lost everything else, you can still find someone else who's lost everything too. And together, in a forgotten place at the edge of the world, you can build something worth remembering, even if it's just a garden where ruins used to stand. The end.